I've explored and discussed a lot of the entities in the analog horror world, and I plan to still do so in the future, but I want to take a look at creepypastas. I love creepypastas. I would read about and watch so many of these creepy pieces of media as a teenager, and they definitely made it hard to sleep. The sheer threat these things pose and the impossible odds of surviving some of these entities are what kept me up at night, and I know it did the same to you. So recently I was nostalgic and I was reminiscing on these stories, and it got me thinking, you could definitely beat some of these, but there's a lot you simply just couldn't, and that's what I want to highlight to you all. I'll be doing this in the same vein as my analog horror entities you wouldn't survive against or could beat videos. That means I'll be talking about a bunch of entities and why you wouldn't survive against them, and then I'll rate them all from least to most powerful. Let's just see how your I'd wins stand against these entities and stories. And if you end up enjoying the video, why not consider subscribing so you don't miss out on more of these videos. Check out my second channel, Soda Jump, where a friend and I get goofy playing video games and doing some IRL things linked in the description, and of course, I'll have the links to what I talk about in the description. So, with all of that being said, let's take a look at the creepypasta entities you definitely wouldn't survive against. If we're going to start anywhere, I think we have to start off with Slender Man, one of the earliest creepypastas to exist. I think it's one of the better ones too because of the simplicity of the character and the story around it. You see, Slender Man was created as part of the Paranormal Pictures Photoshop contest held by Something Awful forums on June 8th, 2009. On June 10th, the forum user Victor Surge posted these two photos of children hanging around a creature known as Slender Man. The descriptions for the images give a little backstory on Slender Man kidnapping these children and a mysterious fire at the library one of these photos was kept at. So we're given some information on Slender Man, but it's not enough, leading the mind to wonder and come to conclusions that'll keep you up at night. Like, why does it kidnap children? Did it burn down the library? What even is this thing? Who knows, but what we do know is that you wouldn't survive against the Slender Man. Let's say you're being hunted down by it or you encounter it somewhere. It would be game over. This thing has supernatural powers and is a masterful stalker. It might make its stalking obvious, but it'll continuously keep you on your toes, almost like it's toying with you. If you don't die from that stress, Slender Man will get you when you least expect it. We see this sort of behavior in the game Slender: The 8 Pages, where you need to collect 8 pages while avoiding Slender Man's presence. You may get all 8 pages and escape, but realistically, that doesn't mean that the pursuit is over. And that's how it gets you, through fear and paranoia. It's widely accepted that the more you fear it, think about it, pursue it, and gain knowledge about it is what will lead to it stalking and killing you. And as far as we know, there's no way of killing Slender Man, none at all. So your best option would be to suppress thinking about it and ignoring it when you see it. But we don't know why the Slender Man does what it does, only it knows. And how can you guarantee that it'll stop pursuing you when you stop thinking about it anyway? If you've seen it or if you've heard about it, you probably know too much already to be safe. Either way, if you come up against this thing, you're not surviving. Strength in numbers could help keep it away, but it'll get you when you're least expecting it. Next up, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite creepypastas, the Russian sleep experiment. A lot of why that is relates to the creepypasta story itself and where the creepy entities of the story come in. As it goes, in the late 1940s, Russian researchers kept 5 political prisoners awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were carefully monitored so the gas didn't kill them and they were in a sealed environment. The first 5 days were fine for the most part, but from there, the prisoners quickly began to lose their minds and they didn't want to be freed from their chamber. They wanted to continue inhaling the gas while tearing each other apart from the flesh. The madness that lurks deep within humanity begging to be freed is what the gas unleashed. And you're not surviving this. In a situation where you're exposed to the gas over a long period of time, there would be no escape from your fate. Someone would be forcing you, or you'd be forcing yourself to be exposed to it. So if you're stuck in a room with the gas constantly flowing in, you're going to turn into this depraved and savage looking entity with anyone else in the room with you. Once that happens, the only way to revert back to a regular human would be to get away from the gas. Even if you do, the madness would have already taken over and you're going to go into an insane rage and fit trying to get more gas, injuring yourself and anyone else around you. If your actions don't result in your demise, someone else's will trying to stop you. Any attempt to leave the experiment would probably result in you being injured or killed by security too. But let's say that you're taken away from the gas, do you really think you'd survive your injuries? Like I've already stated, you'd be injuring yourself trying to get back to the gas. And that's because that's exactly what happened to the prisoners. They wanted to stay in the gas and they went ballistic trying to get back. Similarly, you'd also most likely have been mutilating yourself and ripping off your flesh for consumption or for no good reason. Your injuries are going to catch up to you, especially when the gas has worn off. Looking at the behavior of the prisoners, it seems like their adrenaline is really pumping under the influence of the gas. It's just an assumption, but I think it's a good one to make since doing this kind of damage to yourself and not passing out from the stress it would put on your body is something you can't do under normal circumstances. So whether you sit in the gas, try to get out of it, or eventually get out of it, you're not going to survive. Let's now take a look at a creepypasta that's a bit more recent, the Backrooms. I'm sorry, but even if you think you could survive the Backrooms, you wouldn't. When I refer to the Backrooms, I mean these Backrooms, the original one. This story first appeared on 4chan posted by a user stating, "If you're not careful and you clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old, moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you." Creepy, especially that last part. If 600 square miles of these rooms wasn't enough, you'll eventually encounter something unpleasant. If you heard it skulking around, then it's heard you and knows you exist. Being stuck in a highly lit place like this with no apparent way to get out and no place to hide, you're bound to get caught by whatever else lurks these hallways, entity or not. Of course, you could find other people here and work together with them to try and survive and escape, but come on. 600 square miles? You'd have an impossible amount of distance to cover to try and find a way out. There's also so much room for entities to lurk around, and honestly, you would be extremely unlucky to find yourself here, that's for certain. And okay, if you did somehow calculate and plan to come here and bring supplies, how long do you think they'd realistically last? You'd only be able to carry and take so much, and some things you take might not even make it into the back rooms, or the part of the back rooms that you enter. It would only be a matter of time before something claims you, whether that be an entity, a person, or a group of people, or a lack of food and or water. Even if we included all of the Backrooms levels and entities in the mythos as well, do you really think that it would change much too? And just like with all of these videos, I have to cover something video game related, especially since some creepypastas have thrived off of basing their stories around a specific video game or video game character. So naturally, we should take a look at Sonic.exe. This is a classic. In the story, a person named Tom gets a CD with a note mailed by his best friend Kyle, who he hasn't seen in 2 weeks. The note is a warning about what's on the CD and to destroy it. Of course, Tom ignores Kyle's wishes because he notices that a Sonic game is on the CD. He installs it on his computer, plays it, and experiences the horror that is Sonic.exe. The Sonic of this game is a sadistic, evil, and twisted demon that toys with and murders his friends. Just like he did to Kyle, he toys with Tom too, visiting him in his dreams and messing with him in the waking world. How? Who knows, but it talked to Tom and placed a Sonic plush on Tom's bed that had bloodstains around its eyes. So we're not dealing with a computer virus or a regular ROM hack, this is also a sentient entity. If you find yourself in a situation where you're faced with the torturous wrath of Sonic.exe, you're not surviving. Maybe you installed the game or witnessed your friend playing it. Either way, it's game over. You'd be up against an omnipotent and immortal demon that can levitate, teleport, change game code and reality, has a black hole in its mouth, can confuse and manipulate people as seen in the second story about where people in a cult are swayed into believing that following Sonic.exe's orders is doing good for the world, among other things. Containing it would be a nightmare of a task and you'd be powerless against anything that it does to the game, you or anyone else caught in its grasp, especially since it yearns to rule over humanity because of how fascinated it is over us. It'll play with you and enslave you, and if it gets bored of you or you outlive your usefulness for it, it'll kill you, assuming that the torture it's put you through hasn't already done that. You're not surviving Sonic.exe. But, I mean, you could try your luck and try to win a rap battle against it. You could probably do that against a lot of creepypastas, but sticking to the topic of video games, I really wanted to talk about a Pokemon creepypasta, Polybius, and other things like that, but I think you could actually survive them. Definitely survive them. So I'll stick to Sonic the Hedgehog with the Tails doll. Can you feel the sunshine? I sure can. This doll is, as the name states, a Tails doll, a doll shaped like Tails Miles Prower, Sonic's best friend. This doll can be found in Sonic R, a 3D platformer third-person racing game released in 1997 for the Sega Saturn. It's not as out of place as you might think for a game where Sonic and Co race each other. Sonic and Knuckles get their own Robotnik counterparts for this game in the forms of Metal Sonic and Metal Knuckles. Obviously, Tails got one too, but in the form of the doll. This creepy looking doll. The most popular creepypasta about the doll involves a father who buys Sonic R for his son. His son beats the game over several days and the father sees the Tails doll in the end credits. Curious, he played the game when his son went to bed and played as the Tails doll. All was well until he tagged Sonic in the tag game mode, and then the game shut down. He went back to bed with his wife, and at 2 AM he heard thumping at the bedroom door. He thought it was his son, but no. He saw a little shadow under the door. He slowly opened the door and he heard, "You are coming with me. Forever." It was the Tails doll covered in blood. The blood of his son? Maybe. The creepypasta tells us that the doll can enter reality through doing what was previously done in the game and seems to be murderous. It's also widely believed that it can levitate around, teleport, is immortal, might steal souls, and is powered by the red gem that stems from its head. Just like with Sonic.exe, if this thing has unnatural powers and is immortal, what could you even do to stand against it? There's a very clear power imbalance. This thing might just be a doll, but it possesses powers beyond our reaches. You could get away from it, but that doesn't guarantee that you'd be safe from it. It'll be back for you, and you'd know that. You'd keep your guard up and live in paranoia, and then it'll strike when you're exhausted and your guard is down. Hands down, it would be unfair. You'd have no chance against this thing. Moving on from video games, we have yet another classic, the Rake. This thing looks like a lanky humanoid, but I assure you, you're not surviving this. The story of it spread like wildfire over various forum sites and it became an internet urban legend. What's established is that it's been alive for hundreds of years and was documented as early as the 17th century. It has supernatural strength, speed, and stealth capabilities too. It also has large teeth, sharp claws on its hands, is intelligent, deadly, and most likely immortal or has a long lifespan considering that it was documented in the 17th century. And here we go again. We've seen immortality in the last two entities, so you know what that means. This thing will stalk you, hunt you, and take you when you least expect it. It's been known to also appear in the house of or at the end of its victim's bed as they sleep. It may also appear in the woods it resides in if you're unlucky to be there while it's around. How this thing thinks and what its motives are unknown, making it a terrible and treacherous thing to encounter. But let's entertain some hypotheticals, like if you were in a big group of people and you encountered the Rake. Would it even matter? You'd all still be its prey, and trying to attack it from a close or long range would definitely anger it, bringing your death sooner than later. Trying to trap it or lead it into a trap wouldn't work either. This thing's smart. Do you really think it would fall for a trap? It would be able to sniff something like that out, and say you do somehow get the jump on it, good luck dealing with its heightened speed and strength. Pray that it doesn't enter your house or watch you while you sleep, because you're not surviving the Rake. For our final entity, we'll be taking a look at Zalgo. This thing was created by Dave Kelly, also known as Schmorky. I hadn't heard of this thing before, and I definitely think it can be considered a creepypasta. And you know what? You definitely wouldn't survive against this thing. If you haven't heard of it before either, you'll definitely have seen Zalgo text, which is that cursed or glitchy looking text people use for dramatic effects. In the creepypasta sense, Zalgo, also known as He Who Waits Behind the Wall, and Nosperdian Hivemind, is an eyeless horror with 7 mouths. 6 of the mouths speak in different tongues, and the 7th will sing the song that ends the earth. It also carries the candle whose light is shadow in its left arm, which is stained with the blood of Arm Dager. In its right arm, it holds a dead star. I'm sure you could understand why you wouldn't survive against this thing, but I'll elaborate some more. The creator, Schmorky, describes it as something horrible. Zalgo is something that's coming. It's coming soon. So, along with it being an impossibly supernatural entity, it'll eventually come for you, and all of us. The entity is so strong that it doesn't even need to come for you to get you. Memes of all things show us the results of Zalgofication. It's like what happens to text when you add a Zalgo effect to it, but much more disturbing. As much as it is an entity and something that corrupts things, it's also insight into humanity and how we spread information. The truth and story of a piece of information becomes more warped and distorted the more it's spread and the more it gets away from the original source. Information that's created can be made toxic and hazardous too, leading to someone's destruction physically or mentally. I'm sure you could think of someone or something that got out of hand or veered away from what once made it or them great and enjoyable. Social media is a great example of this too, where people obscure the truth, whether that be something like information or maybe even something parading as beauty or strength. Or maybe it's not trying to hide its corruption and evil intent behind a mask or a filter. That's Zalgo. It's found everywhere like it's omnipotent, like a deep, dark factor of life that is always ready to awaken and spread like a violent wildfire. Zalgo is corruption, violence, distortion, and death, no matter if that's Zalgo itself or how it influences people and information. Just like with an unyielding force like Delta P, once it's got you, it's got you. So now we get to the part where we rate everything from least to most powerful. And just because something may be on the lower end of the power scale, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't obliterate you. First up, as the least most powerful, we have the Russian sleep experiment for a few reasons. The gas that turns you into these entities needs to be breathed in beyond 5 days to start to see the effects take place. And because it's a gas, you'd also need to be in an enclosed environment, meaning that the gas's reach is quite limited. This isn't like the Medusa virus where once you breathe it in, that's it, it's over. The experimental gas here wears you down over a long period of time. The entity that you would turn into is also quite chaotic, frail, and just wants to huff the gas more than anything. But it could easily kill you, and you could turn into one and easily die as well. Next up is the Backrooms, and this is a guaranteed death sentence, but it would be a slow death with spikes of hope and dread littered throughout it. And if that wasn't enough, you'd also have to deal with an entity that you find, or finds you in what feels like an endless, musty building space. That brings us to the Tails doll next. It has supernatural powers and will find a way to hunt you down once it manifests in the real world. But its range and reach is very limited, seeing as you need to play Sonic R and tag Sonic as the Tails doll. But the Rake doesn't seem to have that problem, as it can move about freely in our reality, and is very capable of killing, bringing it up higher than the Tails doll. However, it seems that Slender Man has the one-up on the Rake, that being its ability to seek out its victims in a manner not seen by any other entity here. The more you think about it or pursue it, the higher chance it'll confront you, and you do not want that to happen because your disappearance or death will follow soon. It also has a bigger creepy factor to it since it's been photographed and seen hanging around children who later disappeared. However, all of these entities haven't had world domination in mind, but Sonic.exe sure has, our second most powerful entity on the list. Not only does it boast overpowered abilities that surpass our human capabilities, but it sees us as its playthings it can toy around with until it gets bored and puts us down. That's on the more extended lore side of things, but even just confining its powers to the first creepypasta makes it a force to be reckoned with and something you wouldn't want to unleash on the world. Which brings us to the most powerful entity we looked at in this video, Zalgo. Are you even surprised? I'm not. Physically, this thing is akin to a Lovecraftian nightmare despite it not being one. 7 mouths, one for singing a song that'll bring ruin to the world, it holds a candle that shines darkness, and a dead star in the other. What do you suppose you could even do to this thing? And then we see its effects of corruption on memes, text, and how that relates to the corruption of information and literature in our world, and how it warps us and reality and can lead to violence and chaos. Honestly, I think that's the scariest part of it, seeing as we can all see stuff like that unfolding in our real world. It seems that internet horror has its fair share of entities, creatures, and monsters that we wouldn't stand a chance against. Creepypastas are a part of that horror, and we looked into a bunch of them today and how you wouldn't survive against them. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you want to see more from me, and comment down below your thoughts on what we looked at and how you'd rank things. Would you win? As always, we can't forget the shout out to the patrons and YouTube members. And a big shout out to the highest tier patron member, La Creatura. Thank you for your continued contribution, and thank you to everyone else too. You guys are absolute legends. I'd also like to take a look at creepypasta entities you could definitely beat, considering that during my research for this video, I found a lot that are very beatable. I still also want to take a look at SCPs because there's a lot to talk about, like, a lot. So stay tuned for that on top of the analog horror, and I'll catch ya in the next one.